Iran has died more than once. Not the land, not the people, but the empires, the faiths of power, the ruling systems, over and over again. First, it was ancient Persia, one of the greatest empires on earth. Then it was broken, conquered, remade, Islamized, invaded again, fragmented, rebuilt, revolutionized. And yet somehow, across 2,500 years of conquest, collapse, and transformation, Iran never truly disappeared. Most civilizations do not survive this many shocks. Iran did. So how did one of history's oldest civilizations keep changing everything about itself and still remain Iran? That's where we begin. The entire history of Iran, from Persia to the Islamic Republic. Start with the land, because the land is the first answer. The Iranian plateau sits at one of the most dangerous and consequential crossroads on Earth. Mesopotamia to the west, Central Asia to the northeast, India to the southeast, the open steppe to the north. Every major conquest route in the ancient world either crossed this plateau or crashed against it. That geography meant two things. Iran would always be invaded, and whoever held it would always matter. By the 2nd millennium BCE, waves of Indo-Iranian peoples had migrated onto this plateau, bringing languages, gods, and tribal identities that slowly fused with the land. Two groups rose above the rest, the Medes and the Persians. The Medes built the first major Iranian kingdom. They helped destroy Assyria. They were formidable. But the Persians, a smaller, subordinate group from the south, are the ones that changed everything. Around 550 BCE, a Persian king named Cyrus overthrew his Median overlords, united the Iranian tribes, and then just kept going. He took Lydia. He took Babylon. Within a single generation, he built the largest empire the world had ever seen, from the Aegean to the edges of India. And he governed it with something rare: restraint. Conquered peoples kept their customs. Local elites kept some authority. The Cyrus cylinder reflects a political philosophy built not on softness, but on strategic intelligence. Cyrus didn't just conquer lands, he made them want to stay conquered. This was the Achaemenid Empire, and what made it significant wasn't just its size, it was what it meant. For the first time, the Iranian plateau wasn't a margin of someone else's world, it was the center of its own. Darius the Great refined the system, standardized provinces, built royal roads, raised Persepolis as a ceremonial declaration in stone that Iran was the axis of civilization. But no empire holds forever. Revolts, overextension, succession wars that weakened the throne from the inside, and then from the west came a force that no one on the plateau had ever faced. Alexander of Macedon didn't just defeat Persia, he dismantled it. In barely 4 years, between 334 and 330 BCE, he broke the imperial army, seized the capitals, and burned Persepolis to the ground. The court scattered, the king fled, and was murdered by his own men. The political order that had defined Iran for 2 centuries was gone. Just gone. And for a moment, it looked like Iran itself might disappear into the Greek world. It didn't. Alexander died young, his empire shattered, and on the plateau, Iranian culture did something it would do again and again across history. It outlasted the conqueror. The Greek Seleucids, who inherited the east, gradually lost grip on the interior, and from the northeast, a new Iranian dynasty rose to fill the void. The Parthians held Iran for nearly 5 centuries. They were decentralized, feudal, often overshadowed in the history books, but they did something essential. They kept Iranian identity alive in political form, while Rome pressed hard from the west. And then came the dynasty that turned survival into revival. The Sasanians seized power in 224 and built something far more ambitious than anything since the Achaemenids: a centralized state, a reinvigorated Zoroastrian church, a deliberate campaign to revive Persian court culture, art, and imperial memory. They fought Rome and Byzantium to a grinding standstill for 400 years. The Sasanians weren't just ruling Iran, they were restoring it, consciously reconnecting it to its ancient foundations. And for centuries, it worked. Until the 7th century, when the deepest rupture of all arrived. The Arab-Muslim conquest of Iran was not just a military defeat, it was the kind of civilizational break that most cultures do not recover from. It happened fast. Within 2 decades, the Sasanian Empire, ancient, proud, powerful, simply collapsed. The last king fled east and was killed. Zoroastrianism, the state religion for 1,000 years, was gradually pushed to the margins. Arabic became the language of faith, law, and learning. Iran was absorbed into the Islamic Caliphate, first under the Umayyads, then the Abbasids. This should have been the end. It wasn't. And understanding why is one of the most important things in this entire story. Iran accepted Islam, but it did not become Arab. Over the generations that followed, Iranians didn't just convert, they shaped the new civilization from the inside. They became its philosophers, its poets, its administrators. Avicenna, Rumi, Hafez, Al-Khwarizmi. Some of the most foundational minds in Islamic history were Persian. And through it all, the one thing that held was the language. Persian survived, not as a relic, as a living literary force. Ferdowsi's Shahnameh, written around 1000 CE, retold Iran's mythic past entirely in Persian verse. It was cultural preservation disguised as poetry, a civilization remembering itself on purpose. But for centuries after the Arab conquest, Iran as a unified state didn't really exist. Turkic warlords, Mongol invaders, fragmented kingdoms. The plateau was ruled by outsiders and successors. Iran lived on as a cultural memory, more than a country, until someone rebuilt it. In 1501, a young Sufi warrior named Ismail conquered Tabriz and declared himself Shah. And then he did something radical. He imposed Twelver Shi'ism as the state religion by force across a population that had been largely Sunni for centuries. The Safavid dynasty not only reunified Iran, it refounded it. For the first time since the Sasanians, there was a centralized Iranian state with a distinct religious identity and defensible borders separating it from the Ottoman and Mughal worlds. Shi'ism became fused with Persian nationalhood, a bond that still defines Iran today. Isfahan, the Safavid capital, became one of the most extraordinary cities on earth, and the template the Safavids created, Persian language, Shia faith, centralized monarchy, would outlast their dynasty by centuries. The Safavids eventually fell. The 18th century was violent and chaotic, but the architecture of Iranian identity they had built held firm. What came next was a slower kind of destruction. In the 19th century, under the Qajar dynasty in Iran, Iran wasn't conquered, it was squeezed. Russia from the north, Britain from the south. Territory was lost, sovereignty eroded, humiliating treaties were signed. Iran was never formally colonized, but it didn't need to be. The pressure alone was enough to hollow the state from the inside. The 1920s brought an answer, or tried to. The Pahlavi dynasty, starting with Reza Shah in the 1920s, pursued rapid top-down modernization. secular courts, Western-style institutions, state centralization. The country was officially renamed from Persia to Iran. The idea was to drag an ancient civilization into the modern age by sheer force of will. But modernization without representation creates pressure of its own. Wealth concentrated at the top. Political opposition was crushed. The clergy, sidelined but never broken, watched and waited. And under the surface, resentment compounded for decades. When it finally broke, it broke completely. The 1979 revolution toppled the Shah and replaced 25 centuries of monarchy with something the modern world had never seen, an Islamic republic built on Shia clerical authority fused with revolutionary politics. Led by Ayatollah Khomeini, it was a rupture as dramatic as anything in Iran's long history.
And yet, in the deepest sense, it was also familiar. Another reinvention. Another total transformation of the state. Another moment where everything changed on the surface and something underneath endured. That is the pattern, and it is the answer to the question we started with. Iran did not survive by resisting change. It survived by absorbing it. Conquest after conquest, system after system, and rebuilding around a core that never fully dissolved. The language, the poetry, the civilizational memory, the quiet, persistent awareness shared across centuries that being Iranian means something older than any government, any border, any ideology. Persia became Iran. Zoroastrianism gave way to Islam, monarchy gave way to theocracy, and still the thread holds. Not because Iran refused to change, because it learned over millennia how to become something entirely new and still remain itself.